What if the most hated professor at Hogwarts was also its greatest unsung hero? Severus Snape's story is a modern tragedy. It's the story of a boy who made one fatal mistake, lost the only person he ever loved, and spent the rest of his life working from the shadows to atone for it. But was it enough? For 7 books and 8 films, we saw Snape through one lens, a bitter, cruel teacher with a special vendetta against the boy who lived. His eyes were described as cold and empty, making you think of dark tunnels. We, just like Harry, were so sure that Snape hated him. But what if those dark tunnels held a secret? A truth so profound it would reframe everything we thought we knew. Today, we're exploring the deep flaws and complex heart of Harry Potter's most controversial character. He's a man who forces us to ask one of literature's toughest questions. What makes a hero? Is it being perfect? Or is it the struggle against our darkness, even when it feels like we're destined to lose? To understand the man, you have to meet the boy. Severus Snape's story doesn't begin in the hallowed halls of Hogwarts, but in the grim industrial murk of a place called Spinner's End. The name feels almost too perfect, a place where the threads of fate are spun, twisted, and often frayed. His childhood wasn't one of magic and wonder, but of neglect and fighting. Born to a Muggle father, Tobias Snape, and a witch mother, Eileen Prince, Severus was a boy caught between two worlds, and he didn't truly belong to either. His home was a place of shouting and abuse. His cruel father likely resented the magic in his wife and son, and his mother couldn't protect him from it. From this bleak start, Snape developed a deep-seated feeling of being less than, a powerlessness that would curdle into a desperate need for control and recognition. This rough beginning shaped his entire personality. He likely learned at a young age that the world was a cruel and unfair place, a belief that would come out later in his own cruelty and his cynical mantra to Harry that life isn't fair. An environment like that with no warmth or safety is a textbook breeding ground for someone who desperately wants connection but is also terrified of the rejection and punishment that might come with it. He was a boy who learned that love and pain were tangled together, a lesson that would tragically define his entire life. And then, a flicker of light in all that gray. Her name was Lily Evans. In the fields of their grim neighborhood, Snape, the lonely, awkward boy, found someone who saw past his ill-fitting clothes and sullen face. He'd been watching her, noticing the sparks of accidental magic she couldn't explain. He became her first guide to a world she never knew existed. He was the one who told her she was a witch. For the first time, someone didn't see him as strange or pathetic. They saw him as knowledgeable, as a friend. Lily was the first person to show him real kindness, and for a boy starved of affection, that kindness was everything. She became his anchor, his confidant, his entire world. His devotion to her was immediate and absolute, a desperate, possessive kind of love that would become both his greatest strength and his most tragic flaw. But his low self-esteem was a constant companion. It's often theorized that this showed up in his lack of personal hygiene, the greasy hair and sallow skin mentioned throughout the series, which could have been symptoms of depression rooted in his childhood. He saw himself as unworthy, as ugly, and this fueled a dangerous hunger. He yearned for power, not just for power's sake, but as a cure for the helplessness he felt at home. He found an outlet in his mother's heritage, the wizarding world, and more specifically, the proud, ambitious line of the House of Prince. He was the half-blood prince, a secret title that was both a nod to his mixed heritage and a defiant claim to a nobility he felt he'd been denied. This duality, the neglected boy from Spinner's End and the aspiring prince, created the central conflict of his young life, a tension that would pull him in two devastatingly different directions the moment he escaped to Hogwarts. Hogwarts should have been his salvation. For so many, it's a gateway to acceptance and wonder. For Severus Snape, it just became a new kind of battlefield, a place that would harden his resentments and set him on a dark path. The very first crack in his new life appeared at the sorting ceremony. As Lily Evans was placed in Gryffindor, the House of the Brave, Snape was sorted into Slytherin, the House of Ambition. A tiny groan escaped him in that moment, the sound of a chasm opening between him and the only friend he'd ever had. This separation wasn't just about different common rooms. It was a fundamental split in values that would test their bond. They tried to stay friends, but they were pulled into the worlds of their houses. Lily's new friends were suspicious of the sullen Slytherin boy, and Snape fell in with a crowd fascinated by the dark arts. Future Death Eaters, whose casual cruelty repulsed Lily. She couldn't understand why he hung out with them, and he couldn't understand why she didn't see the world through his lens of ambition and injustice. The distance between them grew from a few yards across a playground to a massive ideological gulf. Making everything worse was the relentless bullying he suffered, mostly from James Potter and Sirius Black. To them, Snape was an easy target, weird, socially awkward, and obsessed with the darker side of magic. They tormented him, hexing him in the corridors in a cruel, sustained campaign of harassment. While it was later said that Snape gave as good as he got, the power imbalance was obvious. James was popular, charismatic, and celebrated. Snape was an outcast. This didn't just wound his pride, it cemented his hatred for James Potter and everything he stood for. It fed his belief that the world rewards the arrogant and privileged while punishing the clever and misunderstood. Every taunt, every jinx, was just another layer of bitterness hardening around his heart. This was also when his brilliant talent began to shine, though mostly in the shadows. He was an incredible student, especially in potions and the dark arts. The margins of his old potions textbook were filled with his own ingenious corrections and original spells, like Sectum Sempra and Levicorpus. He was the half-blood prince, a secret genius who was improving on the school's curriculum. This perfectionism and intellectual arrogance became a core part of who he was. He couldn't stand imperfection in others because he was so relentlessly demanding of himself. It made him a master of his craft, but it also made him impatient, unforgiving, and utterly isolated. His love for Lily remained the one constant, but it was becoming a source of pain. It was an obsessive, one-sided love. While Lily cared for him as a friend, there's little evidence she ever felt the same way romantically. In fact, this unrequited love is likely what produced one of his most powerful magical feats, his Patronus. It was a doe, the very same as Lily's, a perfect secret symbol of his devotion, a piece of his soul forever tied to hers, but he hid it from her. Maybe because he knew it revealed a depth of feeling she couldn't return. The breaking point, the moment the fork in the road became an impassable canyon, is immortalized as Snape's worst memory. After a particularly humiliating public attack by James and Sirius, Lily rushed to his defense. But in his moment of total shame and rage, faced with her pity, he lashed out. He called her mudblood. It was more than a slur. It was a betrayal of everything they were. He used the very ideology of the friends she hated against her, the one person who had never judged him. In that single, venomous word, he chose his pride, his resentment, and his dark ambitions over her friendship. Though he regretted it instantly, the damage was done. He had made his choice. Lily could no longer defend him or make excuses for the path he was on. Their friendship was over. And in losing her, Snape lost his moral compass. The darkness he had only dabbled in now had an open invitation to swallow him whole. With Lily gone from his life, the last barriers keeping Snape from true darkness crumbled. The desire for power and belonging became a roar. He sought out the ultimate source of power in the wizarding world, Lord Voldemort. Joining the Death Eaters was the logical end to the path he'd chosen. It gave him an identity, built on the principles of blood purity that he, a half-blood, ironically clung to. It was a place where his skills in the dark arts would be celebrated. For a boy who grew up powerless, the black robes and the dark mark were intoxicating symbols of strength. As a Death Eater, Snape proved his worth. He was intelligent and skilled, a valuable asset. His mission was to spy, using a potential teaching job at Hogwarts as his cover. It was this mission that led him to the Hogshead Inn on a cold night, where he would make the biggest mistake of his life, an error born from his desperate need to please his new master. He eavesdropped on an interview Albus Dumbledore was conducting with Sybil Trelawney. As Snape listened, she fell into a genuine trance and delivered a prophecy. He heard the beginning. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. He thought he had a prize, a piece of intelligence that would guarantee his status with Voldemort. He rushed to deliver the news, not knowing the full story, not having heard the end of it. This was Snape's fatal flaw, the error in judgment that defines a tragic hero. It was a decision driven by his deepest weaknesses, his desire for approval, and his short-sighted ambition. He handed Voldemort the weapon that would be used to destroy his own world. The Dark Lord, hearing of a child born at the end of July to parents who had defied him, narrowed it down to 2 babies, Neville Longbottom and Harry Potter. For his own reasons, Voldemort chose to target the Potters. He chose to target Lily Evans's son. The moment Snape realized what he had done, his world shattered. The abstract quest for power collided with a devastating personal reality. In his eagerness to serve Voldemort, he had marked the woman he loved for death. Panic and a crushing wave of guilt consumed him. He went back to Voldemort, begging him to spare Lily's life. He didn't care about her husband or her child. His love was selfish and singular. He just wanted her to be safe. Voldemort actually agreed. But Snape knew Voldemort's promises were worthless. Terrified, he turned to the only person more powerful than his master, Albus Dumbledore. He went to Dumbledore not as a hero, but as a terrified, selfish man. He confessed he was the one who relayed the prophecy and begged Dumbledore to hide them. Hide her. Hide them all, he pleaded. Dumbledore, ever the strategist, saw an opportunity in Snape's terror. He agreed to protect the Potters, but he demanded a price. "And what will you give me in return, Severus?" "Anything." That one word was his vow. It was the moment Severus Snape, the Death Eater, died, and Severus Snape, the double agent, was born. His motive wasn't noble, not yet. It was born from a selfish love and a desperate attempt to undo his catastrophic mistake. But the death of Lily Potter, at the hands of the very master he served, would transform that selfish love into a lifelong penance. When Voldemort went to Godric's Hollow and murdered James and Lily, Snape's worst fear came true. His plea had failed. The love of his life was gone, and it was his fault. The grief that followed wasn't just sadness. It was a soul-crushing guilt that would drive him for the next 17 years. His path was now set. His allegiance to Dumbledore, born from a bargain to save Lily, was now sealed by her memory. He had nothing left to live for but his promise, playing the part of a man pretending to be a spy for Voldemort, while truly spying for Dumbledore. This new role was a perfect, if torturous, fit. His guarded, emotionally distant personality, a product of his childhood, became his greatest asset. To deceive a mind reader as skilled as Voldemort required inhuman mental control. Snape had to become a master occlumens, building impenetrable walls around his mind, shutting down his feelings to present a flawless facade of loyalty to the Dark Lord. This constant suppression took an immense psychological toll. He was utterly alone, trusted by almost no one, and hated by both sides. The Order of the Phoenix saw him with contempt, and the Death Eaters would have killed him instantly if they knew the truth. His only confidant was Dumbledore. His job as potions master at Hogwarts became the stage for this long, agonizing performance. To the world, and especially to Harry Potter, he was a cruel, biased teacher, and his venom toward Harry was real. In Harry, Snape saw everything he hated: the face of James Potter, his childhood bully, and a living reminder of his own failure. Harry was proof that the woman he loved had chosen someone else, This resentment festered for years, and he punished the boy for the sins of his father and for the unbearable pain of his own past. But beneath this cruelty was a secret mission to protect Harry Potter. It was the final, terrible condition of his penance. Her son lives. He has her eyes, Dumbledore reminded him, sealing the pact. Seeing Lily's eyes in James's face was a daily torture, a constant reminder of both his love and his hatred. And so, he protected the boy he couldn't stand to look at. Snape's protection was a constant hidden hand. In Harry's first year, it was Snape who muttered a counter-curse to save Harry from Professor Quirrell's jinx during a Quidditch match, while Harry and his friends were convinced Snape was the one trying to kill him. In his third year, he brewed the complex wolfsbane potion for Remus Lupin, a man he despised as one of the Marauders, simply to help him manage his werewolf transformations. He even tried to protect the trio from a transformed Lupin, putting himself in harm's way. When Sirius Black escaped Azkaban, Snape's rage wasn't just about old-school grudges. He believed Sirius was the one who had betrayed Lily. His fury was that of a man who had lost everything, aimed at the person he held responsible. His role grew even more dangerous when Voldemort returned. He had to go back, to kneel before the man who murdered Lily and convince him of his loyalty. He walked a razor's edge, feeding Dumbledore vital information while giving Voldemort just enough truth to stay alive. He was a man living in a self-imposed purgatory, friendless, emotionally barren, and universally reviled. He saved people who would never know it. He was, as Dumbledore knew, exceptionally brave, not because he was fearless, but because he acted in spite of his fear, his hatred, and his profound suffering, all for a love that had ended in tragedy. As the war escalated, the weight on Snape's shoulders grew heavier, leading to the act that would forever brand him a villain in the eyes of the world. It was a calculated murder, a betrayal so profound it seemed to erase any hope of redemption. It was, however, his most difficult and courageous act of loyalty. It all started with an unbreakable vow. Narcissa Malfoy, desperate to save her son Draco from Voldemort's suicide mission to kill Albus Dumbledore, came to Snape for help. With Bellatrix Lestrange as the binder of the vow, Snape promised to protect Draco and to carry out the murder himself if Draco failed. Refusing would mean his own death and the end of his cover. Accepting meant binding himself to an unthinkable act, killing the only man who knew his truth. He was trapped. But this was no surprise to Dumbledore. The headmaster was already dying, thanks to a curse from Marvolo Gaunt's ring. He had a year to live at most. Ever the grand chessmaster, Dumbledore planned to turn his own death into a strategic advantage. He ordered Snape to be the one to kill him. This plan served multiple purposes. First, it would spare Draco's soul. Second, it would cement Snape's position as Voldemort's most trusted servant, placing him at the heart of the enemy camp. And third, it would ensure the allegiance of the powerful Elder Wand wouldn't pass to Voldemort. Snape was horrified. The idea of killing his only ally was repugnant. But Dumbledore insisted, appealing to the vow Snape had made so many years ago. It was an act of profound trust from Dumbledore, and an immense burden for Snape. He had to murder his mentor, become the ultimate villain, and be hunted by the very people he was secretly fighting to protect, carrying the guilt and isolation of it all completely alone. The scene atop the astronomy tower was the tragic climax. Harry watched, hidden, as a weakened Dumbledore was cornered by Draco. When the Death Eaters arrived, Snape swept in. He and Dumbledore locked eyes. There was no hatred there, only a grim understanding. Dumbledore's quiet plea, "Severus, please," wasn't a beg for his life. It was a final, gentle command to fulfill his promise. Avada Kedavra. A jet of green light struck Dumbledore. To Harry and to the rest of the world, this was the ultimate betrayal. Snape had murdered the greatest wizard of their time. He fled into the night, a pariah, the monster everyone had always believed him to be. He had sacrificed his name, his reputation, and the last shred of light in his life to fulfill his duty. It was the moment he became a true tragic hero, a man whose noblest act was seen as his most vile. In the final days of the war, Snape played his last, most dangerous part. As headmaster of a Hogwarts under Death Eater control, he walked a tightrope over a chasm of death, secretly protecting the students as best he could. He was Voldemort's right-hand man, the supposed master of the Elder Wand, and utterly alone. The end came in the Shrieking Shack. Voldemort, frustrated that the Elder Wand wasn't giving him its full power, came to a fatal misunderstanding. He believed that because Snape killed Dumbledore, Snape was the wand's true master. To claim its allegiance, he had to kill him. In a final act of cold cruelty, he didn't use a curse. He unleashed his snake, Nagini. As Snape lay dying, his life bleeding onto the floor, he saw Harry. With his last ounce of strength, he had one final mission. Take them, take them, he whispered as shimmering memories poured from him. He urged Harry to take them to the pensive. And then, his last request, the key to everything. Look at me. He wanted to see Lily's eyes one last time. In that gaze, the pain of his entire life, his unrequited love, his guilt, his years of sacrifice was laid bare. And then, he was gone. In the quiet of the headmaster's office, Harry plunged into Snape's memories and finally learned the truth. He saw the lonely boy, the fierce friendship with his mother, the devastating mistake of the prophecy. He witnessed Snape's gut-wrenching grief and the desperate bargain he struck with Dumbledore. He saw the arguments, the sacrifices, and the bitter, unwavering commitment to protect the son of the woman he loved. And he finally understood a conversation he'd once overheard. Snape, horrified by Dumbledore's plan for Harry to die, had revealed his deepest motivation. "You have been raising him like a pig for slaughter," Snape had raged. Dumbledore, wondering if Snape had grown to care for the boy, was met with Snape's most defining moment. He didn't answer with words. He raised his wand and produced his Patronus. A silver doe, Lily's doe, sprang from its tip. "After all this time?" Dumbledore asked, his voice filled with wonder. "Always," Snape replied. That single word was the sum of his life. A life of torment, bitterness, and profound mistakes, but also of a love so powerful it endured beyond death, beyond rejection, beyond hope. A love that fueled a 17-year-long act of penance, a redemption that played out entirely in the dark. Harry saw it all, the cruelty, the bravery, the pain, the love, and his perception of the man he had hated for so long was changed forever. Severus Snape hadn't been a villain. He had been the war's most tragic, most unlikely, and perhaps its most essential hero. So, was Severus Snape a good man? The question is almost impossible to answer because he was never simple. He was a man of staggering contradictions, cruel yet brave, a bully but also a protector. His love was obsessive and selfish, yet it motivated the most profound act of self-sacrifice in the entire series. Snape wasn't the hero we wanted. He wasn't noble like Lupin or dashing like Sirius. He was a bitter, emotionally scarred man who made terrible choices and paid for them for the rest of his life. His story is a true modern tragedy. He had noble qualities, intelligence, courage, and unwavering loyalty, but was undone by his fatal flaw, his inability to let go of the past. His single greatest mistake led to a lifetime of suffering and an atonement so complete that it required him to be hated by everyone he protected. He lived without love, friendship, or recognition, only to have his heroism revealed after his lonely, violent death. Harry Potter, the boy who survived because of Snape's sacrifice, eventually understood this. He named his son Albus Severus, honoring two of the bravest men he ever knew. It was a final acknowledgement of the truth that heroism isn't about being flawless. It's about the choices we make when faced with our own darkness. It's about fighting for the right side, even when you're standing in the shadows. Severus Snape lived a life of misery and died a hero's death, all for the love of a woman who was gone. His story reminds us that people are rarely just one thing. and that sometimes the most profound acts of love are the ones whispered in the dark, with a single heartbreaking word, always. The debate over Snape is one of the most enduring in the fandom. Was he a hero, a villain, or something much more complicated? I really want to know what you think. Head down to the comments and tell me your take on the Potions Master.